Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and heard all over the world. The station is based out of Monticello, Maine in beautiful Aroostook County, and it is sponsored by Camp Constitution, which, among other things, runs a week-long family camp, actually a week and a day. We had a great camp this past July, and the camp actually runs in New Hampshire, in the town of Ringe, New Hampshire, at the Toa-Nippie Christian Retreat Center. And next year's camp, July 2nd to the 9th, and we're lining up some great instructors, Larry Pratt of Gunners of America, Mrs. Chris Ann Hall, who's be coming back now for her 4th year, and Reverend Stevie Kraft, and many others. And we have some special events planned for July 4th, Independence Day. And we also visit our website at campconstitution.net, and you will see a page called the Sam Blumenfeld Archives. And thanks in part to this show that's heard around the world and many other people promoting the page, we've received, 137,000 views in the last 2 months, June and July. There's a lot of incredible material there. You can actually teach people how to read using alphaphonics, a PDF version of it, as well as 128 lessons in video and audio that was made available by Mr. Blumenfeld. Mr. Blumenfeld Dr. Blumenfeld was one of the pioneers of the modern homeschool movement and a good friend of Camp Constitution and a close friend of mine. Anyway, we have a very special guest, Stephanie Clark. Are you there, Stephanie?
I am. Hi.
Well, hi. Thank you for coming on to Camp Constitution Radio. And Stephanie Clark is the executive director of Amirah. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Actually, it's Amirah.
Amirah, and that's Aramaic for princess, I understand.
Yep, it is.
And I met Stephanie at the church that my family attends in Canton, Massachusetts, the Link Church, and she just explained what her ministry does. So first off, give us a little information about your background and what got you involved in this very important ministry.
Sure, yeah. So originally I grew up in Michigan and am a Midwest girl, but we ended up moving out to New England back in 2009. I pursued ministry and became an associate pastor at Calvary Christian Church in Linfield for a time, but I really was sensing a call from God to be working with women who were sex trafficked. And so it was really the end of 2014 and the beginning of 2015 that I began to really pray about that and pursue that. And I, just happened to stumble upon Amirah and realized that they were looking to hire an executive director. And so I was hired, all because really God was a part of it. So that's how I came into this work.
That's how I think all ministries happen. And I always believe that God puts you where He wants you if you're in His will. And this is what you were meant to be and meant to do. Now, your organization, you're on the North Shore of Boston in the town of Wenham. And is it a national organization or is it just a local organization?
So right now it's a local organization. We're a safe home for women that were sex trafficked, and we are located in Massachusetts. We partner with other sister organizations throughout New England. We're a part of a coalition of other safe homes within New England, so that way we can pull resources and work together in this work. But right now we're just a local Massachusetts-based organization.
Now, your organization is Christ-based, of course. Are the ones you network, are they all necessarily Christ-based entities, or do you know offhand?
No. So there are the statistics that we have. There are 4 safe homes total in all of New England for this work of actually housing, women who were sex trafficked, and or some actually also house women that were labor trafficked. And so you're talking a total of 17 beds that were meant specifically for this population in all of New England.
Wow.
Yeah, and so 3 of us are faith-based. Amirah, we are, based within the Christian faith. The other 2 are both part of Catholic organizations. And then there's another organization up in Vermont, and I don't think they have any faith affiliation whatsoever, but clearly, I don't think they're opposed to working with people that are. So.
I think that's the key. I met when I was at church. I introduced you to a dear friend of mine, Dr. Kishore, who was very instrumental in he created something called the Massachusetts model to get people off drug addiction with a very good success rate. And every clinic he had a clergyman on staff or a member of the clergy. And that's just so important. The spiritual aspect of this is so important because a person has mental problems, physical problems, and of course the best way to live is through Christ. I mean, that's I think if it wasn't a Christian-based entity, I would be less inclined to even support it. So tell us now. We hear about sex trafficking and slavery and these types of involuntary servitude, and we think that happens in certain parts of the world, but not here, of course, not in New England. I mean, we're just so far ahead of that. And I do remember back in 2001, the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company was setting up shop in Boston, and some of us tried to stop it because, among other things, not only do they smuggle weapons into local gangs, but they also are involved in the slave trade. They will actually get contracts, mostly women from China, and they'll bring them over here to New York or to Boston, to other ports where they will work. Sort of, they're trying to be relocated here, but for the price of the cost of them being shipped here, they've got to work so many years and months or whatever it is, and a lot of these people work in very poor conditions. But explain how does that happen? How does that happen here in the United States? This concept of sex trafficking.
Sure. It's actually something that's been happening pretty much from the beginning of the United States. We just have never actually put the right terminology to it. And so let's first define that word trafficking. So the U.S. State Department has actually defined it now as the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And so that's the key that you want to remember, that there is some sort of force, there was fraud involved, or there is just plain and simple coercion to get a human being to do, sexual acts or labor, organ harvesting, any sort of act, and there is no payment or, actual money exchanged for them. The money is exchanged, but it goes to somebody else. And so that's what trafficking is. A lot of people will think, well, trafficking, then that means that has to go across some sort of borders, whether that's an international border or a state border, and that's really, not the case. That's not what that term means. And so if you understand the definition of trafficking, then we can begin to rewire what this actually looks like. And a lot of what I do is try to educate the community about, well, this is what this actually looks like, because most of the time people think, well, okay, so we're just talking about prostitution then. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is, if you speak with a woman who is in the sex trade and she's prostituting herself, if you ask some questions, there probably is some man, possibly even some woman, that's over her, and they are taking all of her money. And she actually is not holding on to any of that money that's being exchanged for her body. She has to pass it up to the person that owns her. And there's very limited opportunity for her to escape from this life. She's, bound to this person, not physical chains, but there's mental, emotional, psychological, emotional chains to this person, as well as usually drug addiction as well, too. And so everything that we've always thought, well, this is just prostitution. The reality is that these women and even men and boys are being trafficked. And so that's what this looks like in New England. And the other misnomer that we often think about, and this is really where, it begins to hit home. I mean, when I talk about sex trafficking, usually people will think of, Hollywood movies like Taken with Liam Neeson and think, okay, well, this is what happens over there. And then when I begin to say how this happens here, then they begin to think about, well, okay, well, this is internationals that are being brought over, right? So mm-hmm. It's women from Eastern Europe, or it is women from China and Asia and all this. And while that does happen, here in New England, the majority of women that we are seeing be trafficked actually grew up right here in New England. So there are our own daughters and sisters and cousins and aunts and mothers that are right here growing up in our very own towns, and they were vulnerable at some point, and a man came along, promised them amazing things, and they fell for that promise, leading them into being trafficked.
So the typical young lady, and we're talking mostly young ladies, I would think, in their late teens and early 20s, they're promised things, and when they become sort of these, what's the right word, slaves or involuntary workers, they're giving them some housing and some clothing, and pretty much that's about it. And if they try to leave, there's physical abuse, I would imagine.
Sure. I mean, every story is different for these women. There is some sort of vulnerability, and you're right, it is, young women. The fact of the matter is, right now across America, the average age for a woman to be brought into sex trafficking, so to begin sex trafficking, is 14. And so, yeah, and that's the average. So that tells you it's much younger too. But they begin to get into a cycle. So the sad stories that I've heard, just the average is that there's just some sort of vulnerability. So a young girl is vulnerable. This could be because, maybe she's part of the foster care system, which is a broken system, unfortunately, and, she's a part of abuse after abuse after abuse and runs away. Or, unfortunately, like somebody within their foster family actually becomes their trafficker, something along those lines. We know if a girl runs away, that within 48 hours of her running away, she's going to get approached by a pimp, whether she's at a truck stop or on the side of the street or, in a city. They know exactly what to look for, and they will approach them, and they will, take them out, get them some food, be really, really nice to them, even maybe have them stay at their place and begin to have some sort of relationship form. And so that's what we see, is that, a relationship is forming between this man that's offering them something they've never been offered before. And so the vulnerability creates, this, vacuum for them to really be manipulated. And so the guy forms a relationship. He begins to sexualize them, having a relationship with them, but even introducing them to, communities that are just over-sexualized. So going to parties where there's strippers and going to parties where there's a lot of drugs, and getting them hooked into this lifestyle of doing drugs. And he's planting little seeds along the way about the great life that they're going to have. So we can get you more Gucci purses if maybe you could just make a little money for a little while. And things are really tough right now for me, so maybe you could just do this for a little bit, make a little money for a little while. And so what seems like a choice for her is actually him manipulating her into doing this. And she loves him, doesn't want to not please him, doesn't know any other way to stop this, and so will begin to do this. And so it becomes a system that, she's doing these things, thinking she only has to do it for a little while, needs drugs to do these things, and then continues on again and again and again, every single night, every single year, realizing as she's going along that she's trapped into this. There's shame upon shame. She's a drug addict now. She needs to do this so that she can get the drugs, because there's no other way, to get this from him. And how is she ever going to go back to her family? How is she ever going to show her face again to them? How, is she ever going to return? And so even if she could physically leave, there's just so much shame to be able to go back, plus the drug addiction. And so it becomes a vicious cycle for them.
And I would think their life expectancy living this lifestyle isn't very long unless they get out of it. I can't imagine the amount of drug overdoses and being abused and getting not a very healthy lifestyle. There's a Hollywood stereotype, and I think it's probably not the correct one, because people they might think of pimps with a certain particular background in certain neighborhoods. But I believe that you could live in a nice upper middle class neighborhood, and there could be a house on the corner, and most people don't even know what's going on there. So, what is the typical person that engages in this behavior, and also the economic background of the young ladies?
Sure. So there's not necessarily a norm for the women that are being trafficked. The norm is vulnerability. Yes.
So that encompasses all backgrounds, all economic
correct.
backgrounds.
Yeah,
yeah.
All,
poor people,
all races,
middle class, up and up. Yeah.
Right, and it encompasses both genders. We're definitely seeing a rise in young boys being caught up into this. The unfortunate thing is they prey upon vulnerability, and so the whole rise of being bullied, and the transgender community that's being bullied, the homosexual community that's being bullied, they are being preyed upon as well too, which is just extremely sad and disheartening. Because it just creates even greater problems for these kids, and so it does not matter their economic stance or status. We do know, the impoverished communities, there's going to be a greater area of vulnerability there. But I've seen women that have come from homes that are very wealthy homes. Their parents, love them. They were just busy parents working a lot. And something, struck with this young girl that she decided she was going to go away with this guy and be, with him. And so, I've seen everything under the sun, from really, really poor circumstances to pretty extreme wealthy circumstances for these women to be brought into this. The pimps, the actual men that are preying upon these girls and boys and doing this, that is a population that's definitely different. There's an interesting study that's being done showing that this is actually something that's kind of a generational thing, because you have to wonder, why on earth would some man or woman want to enslave another human being to do this? What is going on with them that they thought that was okay? So I'm not, obviously I'm all for, action being brought against these pimps and legal circumstances happening. But at the same time, we need to go after the actual cause for this as well, too. And what we've noticed is that this is a generational thing. So their father was a pimp. Their grandfather was a pimp. So this is a learned trait. We're also seeing that it's a part of, mobster, gangster lifestyle, that it's like an apprenticeship. So they are being raised up within their apprenticeship to become a pimp. And this is just a part of that whole life, that, well, I'm going to become a pimp, and I'm going to have a harem of women. Right.
I think our secular culture kind of promotes this, too. This is a great thing to be. It's something to strive for.
100%. I mean, the 50 Cent, P-I-M-P, this is exactly everything that this is a part of. So something that is a part of our culture, and it's glorified, which is really, sad. And I think that we need to work on course correcting this, that this is not something that should be glorified. This is, actually owning other human beings, and that's not okay. And selling them for sex, that's not okay. That's not what sex was ever intended for. So that's usually the population that is putting these women out there. The population that is buying, so what this is called as Johns, is actually your average 40-year-old white man with 2 kids at home. And so that's the population that is purchasing sex. And that is across, that could be a religious person or not a religious person. So I'm often, talking with pastors saying, look, if you're going to have me come share at your church, I'm all for it, but you need to be prepared that you might have some Johns in your church, and they might get convicted, and you need to work with them. I'm not out for shaming these men. In fact, if I can reach these men and open up their eyes to what this is, and they can stop buying sex, then we're off to a great start.
You destroy the demand, and then you try to prevent. So preventing these things, and then it's just like with drug addiction. You try to prevent it, instead of treating it, and then and try to stop it. Like you say, if someone's in the church and engaged in this, they should be ashamed of themselves. If they're Christians in good standing, yet they've got this secret lifestyle behind them. Definitely.
Right.
What is I don't know if it's hard to say, how many women or young ladies do you think, in a given area, are involved in this? Is there a certain percentage? Or I know it's probably hard to have the raw numbers, but it may be a little more prevalent than most people think. Is that the case?
Right. It absolutely is. The unfortunate thing is that it's extremely, you can't really put a statistic on it. And the reality is, I will say this, because, Super Bowl comes and everybody's like, oh, this is the largest day for trafficking. The reality is, no, it's another day. It just gets more coverage. And so it's really sad that people think, well, there's all of a sudden a spike in how many people are being trafficked, and you're like, no, they're just getting moved to one location, and people are actually covering this in the news now. And so, yeah, this happens everywhere. I think that's what needs to be understood is, this is, if there's a hotel down the street from you, you can be clear that there's probably women sitting in that hotel being trafficked. Everything is hidden in plain sight, so there's no longer, if back in the 70s, you'd go down to Chinatown, you'd see the women on the streets, and you saw it. But right now, everything is put online. And so Backpage is pretty much the horrible Craigslist, and women and boys get posted there all the time. They get a number, you call the number, they're told you come to this spot at this time, and that's it. And the majority of these places are hotels. It happens in massage parlors. It happens in nail salons. It happens, there are brothels. There are actual brothels within your communities. And it happens in every single community. It actually happens more often in the more prevalent communities because, again, the average John is a 40-year-old white man. So you might think, okay, well, this is happening. You have to go into Lynn to do this, or, you have to go into Revere or Dorchester. And no, for goodness sakes, like there was a bust in Burlington, Massachusetts. There's the women that I'm working with, they're pointing to hotels and in Saugus and in, Danvers and all over the place saying, yep, I was there. Wow. And so this is where this is happening. We just don't realize this, and we're kind of wanting to be blind to see this, thinking that this could be happening somewhere else.
What is one of the what's the right question? How does say a young lady? Let's say that we knew somebody that was having this problem. How do people approach your ministry? People who are do you go out and find these people, or do they come to you? How does that work?
Sure. So I would encourage churches, one, to be empowered about this. That this is happening in their communities, and because they're the church, they're probably going to see women that are a part of this. People come to churches all the time, like I have a need. I would encourage churches to understand that this is a very vulnerable, traumatized population, and so to, as soon as possible, get the experts involved. And I appreciate and love Christians. I am one myself, but sometimes we have a tendency to want to be saviors. And that is exactly the opposite of what needs to happen for these women. They really need the professionals, and they really need, that kind of care. And I get asked all the time by very well-meaning people, look, I have a bed. Do you think, I can take a woman in? And I just look at them and smile, and I'm like, no, you're talking about a drug addict that has horrible contacts, that's really emotionally attached to that horrible contact, and you would be putting your entire family in jeopardy. Yeah. And you would probably do her more harm because you're not necessarily trained. All of our program staff, they have masters of counseling backgrounds and, LMHCs, and so they're mental health professionals, and so they are trained to be able to work in some aspect with this population. So that's kind of, my first, yes, we want you to help with this, but at the same time, we want to empower you to reach out to the appropriate contacts. And so there's an organization called the Abolitionist Network that's run out of the Emmanuel Gospel Center, and the executive director of that is a woman named Sarah Dunham, and she actually comes and she trains churches on what you can do if this population were to come to you. And she has an entire church exploitation plan, a safety plan with numbers listed on it, like here are the safe homes in the area, here's the contact at Homeland Security that you can call, here's, if this person is underage, here's medical providers. So if somebody were to come into your church doors, you would have the appropriate numbers to call that you could give this woman into the right hands.
Is this group Boston-based, or is it national?
Yep, No, it's Boston-based, so it's run out of Emmanuel Gospel Center, and it's called the Abolitionist Network. And Sarah Dunham is the woman that does that training for churches, and we absolutely support it. We're 100% for it. It's absolutely needed. I think the biggest thing that churches can understand and do is that they don't need to form another ministry wing to be serving this population. They just need to support what's out there. You know,
right.
I say that all the time. I'm like, if I had every church in New England committing like to being a monthly donor, even if it was $25 a month, I would probably have a second home up and running already rather than just one safe home, you know? And so like if every church was like, yeah, we would actually commit to being partnering with this, which means a financial stewardship, it means prayer partnership, and it means, you know, even volunteering and actually serving, you know, with these women, then I would be opening more homes. No problem at all.
But if every church, if every church in New England, even a small amount, it would enable you to probably expand not just one more, but a number of places.
Absolutely.
Now, the house that you have, is it owned? Was it donated? Did you buy the house? Was it donated to the ministry?
Yeah, so this is actually a really neat story. It was a church that owned this home prior to us owning it. And so we purchased it from them. We rented it from them, or we rented it for years and renovated it, but then we were able to purchase it. And they gave us a pretty significant discount, which was absolutely amazing, and they believed in our mission, and so we're very thankful for that.
And Wenham is sort of a high-rent district, so to speak.
Wenham is where our P.O. box is, not where our safe home is.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. We have to keep the location of our safe home, obviously, secret.
Of course.
But yeah, that's where our P.O. box is. And then we do a pretty good job of confusing people because, you know, our website says Amirah, Boston. So they're like, well, you have a P.O. box here, but your website says Boston. I'm like, exactly. I just want to confuse you. So that's what we try to do.
Do you have any plans on the drawing board, so to speak, to have other homes in the area?
Yeah, that's my goal. You know, we're talking through as a board really what the next steps are over the next, you know, year, 2 years, 5 years. You know, I want to be able to open up more homes. The program that we do with the women is really extensive. When Amirah was forming, they researched what is out there.
How old was the organization?
Yeah. The organization was formed in like the idea was formed in 2009. So they went out and looked around and went across America and talked with other safe homes about what is the best way to work with this population. And, you know, we came back and said whole person care is what we want to do, which means we're addressing the whole person. So there's 6 avenues to a whole person, which is physical, mental, emotional, social, vocational, and spiritual. And so the woman that's been through this trauma, she has experienced trauma actually in every avenue of her whole person. And so we design an individualized program for her and her specific trauma in each avenue and help her work through that. And so it's a 3-phase program that she does. She could be in our home and in our program for a year to 2 years, but within that time, we're looking to help her address her physical needs right off the bat, which is, you know, obviously taking care of the drug addiction piece and helping her to work on her sobriety. There's a lot of physical needs that they go through. We've had women that have faced massive beatings because of the drug addiction and the beatings that they've taken. Usually their teeth are pretty shot, and so the dental needs are enormous. And so I'm always saying, like, if we could have like 10 or 15 dentists say, I'll commit to one woman a year, even if it means like I'm doing implants for that woman, because, you know, most of these women are losing their teeth and they really need some significant work. That's a huge need. We have a minute left, and we wish we had more time, and we'll probably do this again. Give out your website, phone number, contact information, if you could. Sure. So our website is www.amirahboston.org, which is AMIRAH Boston.org. And if people want to reach us, they can call us at 781-462-1758. If we don't answer, leave a voicemail, and we'll always get back to you within about 48 hours.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for giving us the interview. We'll break your ministry, and God bless you. Folks, you've been listening to Camp Constitution Radio on WBCQ The Planet, heard every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for listening, and God bless.